All right. So thank you all for joining us for our penultimate session here, the impact of COVID-19 on learners and educators. I am going to hand it over to Brian Howard, who is a research and policy analyst for the American Indian Policy Institute at Arizona State University. So Brian, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Dustin. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. My name is Brian Howard. I'm a research and policy analyst with the American Indian Policy Institute, located within Arizona State University. And I'll be moderating today's session, which will be focused on COVID-19 and its impacts on education. Primarily, my background has been in tribal telecommunications issues. Prior to joining the American Indian Policy Institute in August of 2016, I worked for nearly 5.5 years in Washington, D.C. for the National Congress of American Indians, primarily working on telecommunications issues. So had a lot of work behind the USF-ICC transformation order, many iterations of the E-rate modernization, and as well as the Lifeline programs. I also did work on protection of cultural sites, eagle feathers and eagle protection issues, and the Change the Mascot campaign, and as well as Native 8A contracting issues. Primarily, I'll give you a little bit of background about the American Indian Policy Institute. We were founded by the Arizona State Board of Regents in 2008, primarily to serve as a tribal research think tank within Arizona State University. Historically, our focus has been on a lot of environmental policy and regulation issues affecting tribal nations, both locally, regionally, and nationally. At the beginning of this year, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had kind of issued a number of our annual policy priorities for the year to focus on. A lot of that actually focused on agricultural issues affecting tribes, especially looking at planning for the next reauthorization of the Farm Bill and what kind of funding we could look for to really push the adoption of technology access, adoption, as well as telecommunications access for data analytics and tribal farming. Data analytics, anything looking at monitoring soil, water quality for tribal agricultural farms, food processing standards and adherence to tribal cultural sensitivities around modern food processing applications, but also looking at kind of emerging technologies. And we really wanted to focus on the next generation of workforce development and modernizing that in a sense of looking at what types of technologies, what types of education we should really be pushing for tribal access to ensure that our workforces are protected in the transition of further adoption of technologies in these different types of areas. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to shift a course as of February of this year, primarily, of course, focused now on the digital divide even more so. Again, my background is in telecommunications, but it has become increasingly even more so due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll start us off with a few introductions. First, I'd like to introduce Fernando Cardenas, Senior Manager in Employee Engagement and Partnerships for Internet Essentials Program at Comcast. Fernando, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Like Brian mentioned, I'm Fernando Cardenas. I work with the Internet Essentials program at Comcast. And just to give you some background, Internet Essentials is the company's signature social impact initiative. It's the country's largest broadband adoption program for low-income households. And we're really a wraparound approach where we provide there's three main components to our program. The first is that we offer an in-home high-speed connection for $9.95 a month. There's no contract, no credit check. In addition to that, and something that's so important right now is we give our customers the opportunity to purchase a device, so a laptop or desktop, at a highly discounted rate that comes equipped with Microsoft Office Suite and virus protection. So they're just ready to use it as soon as it gets home. And then in addition to that, we also provide digital literacy training in print, online through our online learning center that's open to everyone. and in person. We work with tens of thousands of community partners across the country to provide digital literacy training, which is so important now more than ever. And just really excited to be a part of this conversation. I was raised in a low-income community. I'm the first person in my family to get a college degree, so I understand how important education is to sort of being that equalizer and giving upward mobility to families. And just really excited to be part of this conversation to talk about how we ensure that our low-income communities maintain to have that opportunity to a stellar education. So.
Thank you, Fernando. Next, I'd like to introduce Marian Kusman, Manager of Digital Inclusion Initiatives at the Nashville Public Library.
Marian, you're on mute.
Thank you, Brian. As he said, my name is Marian Chrisman. I manage a digital inclusion program for the Nashville Public Library. And as most people know, libraries have been offering free digital literacy training since the late 90s. And our program was created to take this digital literacy training beyond the walls of the library and out into the community. And our primary focus right now is with seniors, many of whom are not comfortable or not able to come to the library for the training, so we take the training to them. Prior to COVID-19, all of our classes were small, face-to-face classes with lots of volunteer helpers in the classroom to assist the seniors and help them stay on track. And in addition to the classes, we also provided live in-person support to the senior community. So it has been a challenge for us moving our face-to-face and very high touch programming model to a virtual one. So where we are right now is for seniors who have completed one of our programs, we're providing additional learning opportunities with pre-recorded videos. We're also providing remote support, and we're also planning to increase the number of online self-paced classes that we offer through our Digital Learn platform. For new users, we'll be starting a pilot in September, and for this pilot, seniors will be subscribing to broadband services in their home, and that will probably be Internet Essentials. Because they live in a HUD-supported housing, they all apply for Internet Essentials. And the format of the class will include a combination of recorded videos and live training sessions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Marian. Kimball, I'm gonna try my best. I always have trouble pronouncing Hopi names, but next I'd like to introduce Kimball Sikukwaktiwa. She's the Chief Technology Officer at Santa Fe Indian School.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. That was an outstanding effort, Brian. Full props. Hello out there, my name is Kimball. I'm from the Hopi tribe, and I married in Cochiti Pueblo here in New Mexico, where I have 3 kids and have resided for about 20 years now. As he mentioned, I'm the Chief Technology Officer at the Santa Fe Indian School. The Santa Fe Indian School is owned and operated by the 19 Pueblos. We were originally founded in 1890 as an off-reservation boarding school, one of the bad ones you hear about in American Indian history. But we've been tribally owned since the 1977 Indian Self-Determination Act. We've also participated in E-Rate and have been a technology leader in the Bureau's 183 schools for a long time, but that was when, and we continue to be, but technology and school technology, it used to be assumed to be on the property, and now we're looking at it across the state. So we were seeing that change even before COVID, but COVID certainly did jumpstart a lot of the need to solve the digital divide, you know, in 2 to 4 weeks once we left campus in March. I was thinking about, you know, how to introduce myself and to jump and how to get to the great work that's being done in the Pueblos and in New Mexico to, you know, address the connectivity issues. And I thought, well, maybe it's best if I just share the experience that we went through in these last couple of months. You know, on campus in February and March, we were watching the pandemic get closer and closer. And we were watching that youth were the carriers, but it was the elderly that was the most susceptible. And, you know, we live in small communities where each life is just such a, you know, a vital member of our community. And furthermore, as an off-reservation boarding school, 2/3 of our students from the 19 Pueblos, the Apache tribe, and the Navajo Nation in New Mexico live on campus with us for 5 days a week and then go home. Plus, we have 3 bus lines from northern and southern Pueblos that come in every day. So we come in and we mix, and then we send people home. And knowing that the health risk, we just decided, you know, I remember it was I believe it was a Thursday at 10, we were talking about it. At 3, we put everybody on the buses and they didn't come back for the year. We were able to send them home with a Chromebook, and we thought that was going to be very helpful, and it was. But at that point, we just had to accept whatever level of connectivity was going to be in the Pueblos at that time. So it turned out that connectivity would be our greatest challenge. As all of us know, probably in this conversation, data about connectivity is very elusive. And it's something that I'm now trying to intentionally collect for our community. But I think you can say that we track the 2016 FCC report that says that, let's see, what is it? That 41% of people living on tribal lands lack access to broadband, and in rural tribal lands, that's 68%. So as we're getting our feedback in to this remote learning experience, that's about what we're feeling. Furthermore, we have to recognize how they connect to the internet. And what we're seeing is that even when they have a home connection, it's majority cellular based. And we know those can be expensive, data capped connections. And that's consistent with, you know, the ASU, our moderator today's co-authored report on tribal connectivity that came out last year, showing that the majority of our families are connecting, relying on these cellular connections. And they're not meeting the 25-3 criteria to say that they have that. Furthermore, they're prepaid users. So where they have trouble with the credit reports or the credit checks and putting a credit card on file, it's a lot of prepaid use. So when there's cash, then they buy the card. So numbers change all the time, or they have internet one day and they don't the next day, and then they have it again. So that's just a characteristic of our community that we recognize as we go into remote learning. So as we went into the spring and then closed out the year, we did it. I mean, we made it. Our seniors graduated, but the feedback that came in was problematic. First of all, what was going on then in our communities is that when the pandemic hit, and we're getting into April, May now, is that our Native communities got disproportionately hit by COVID. You would see that 57% of the cases in New Mexico were Native. Well, we're only 11% of the population. And we represented 50% of the deaths as well. So what our leadership did is we closed down the Pueblos, like physically. We set up security booths. People could not get on and people couldn't get off. The tribal members were restricted to maybe 2 people per vehicle. Youth couldn't leave unless they were had an appointment, and essential workers only. But what that did is it confined our populations into whatever internet was available on the Pueblo. So the tribal libraries, they tried to stay open as long as possible, but they were eventually shut down for the large gathering issue. But they left their Wi-Fi on in the parking lot. So that was definitely helpful. We saw families where a parent would drive one kid out and then go use the internet somewhere public, and then come back on the Pueblo and get another kid, and then take that child out. So that wasn't sustainable. For academically at the Santa Fe Indian School, we have this thing called the Senior Honors Project, and we saw our seniors completing their essays, these capstone research papers on their phones, even though they had the Chromebook, because the internet was on the phone, it didn't hotspot, and then the Chromebooks just became paperweights. We had another student handwrite their paper, take pictures of it, and then text the pictures in to their teacher. And you know, we just knew, and we were seeing that too many of our students weren't connected, and we were really concerned about how we were going to do better, you know, moving into the fall. So that's really been our focus. Equity is a huge issue. You know, you can only design to the least connected students. So what we're saying is on Monday, you have to go download. Friday, you have to go upload in one of these public Wi-Fi areas. And in the middle, you can seek help if you need help. As a parent of a student, I find that highly problematic for rigor and not losing academic gains through this, and staying competitive with wealthier schools who not only had in areas that have the devices, the connectivity, but also have a long history of have technology-rich instruction where their pedagogy is already can teach in that style. So as schools, then we also have to do the professional development in a short term and up our skills there. So I know it's just an introduction, and I would like to just let you know, I'm going to talk about, you know, some of our tribal responses. But, you know, in the short term, we did the hotspot game like everybody else, very expensive Band-Aid. And as we move into the fall, we've been able to work with some of our partners, including the New Mexico Indian Ed Division of the Public Education Department, and NAVA Education Project, which is a voting and census group. And we've been working to deploy about, I think in the end, it should be between another 150 and 175, sorry, that'd be way too much, public Wi-Fi locations on tribal land to assist in the fall. But even then, that's a midterm solution, and really putting in that permanent tribal infrastructure is our goal. So thank you for having me today.
Great, thanks, Kimball. And I actually do have a follow-up question for you after we do our introductions regarding Chromebooks. You raised a really good point there. Our final, but definitely not least panelist is Emmy Singh from the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. She is a senior program specialist, and of course, NTIA is located within the U.S. Department of Commerce. So, Emmy?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Amy Tseng, and as Brian mentioned, I'm a senior program specialist for the Broadband USA program, which is housed in NTIA within the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I'll give you a little background on NTIA. NTIA actually has been a longtime partner with the Internet Governance Forum. So NTIA is responsible for advising the executive branch on telecommunications and information policy issues. Our major initiatives cover broadband policy, spectrum policy, internet policy such as digital privacy and internet governance, and public safety through FirstNet, the nationwide public safety broadband network. The program that I work on, Broadband USA, supports community and states' efforts to increase broadband access, adoption, use, and digital skills by educating state and local and tribal leaders and other broadband stakeholders by providing resources, tools, and webinars. We also convene different stakeholders, including government entities at all levels, community anchor institutions, nonprofits, and industry to help facilitate conversations and potential partnerships through workshops and cohort meetings. We also directly advise states and communities throughout the country on their broadband infrastructure and digital inclusion efforts. Personally, I work primarily with local and state governments on their digital inclusion strategies and initiatives. And as we've seen through the opening remarks, and what we see is that more than ever before, people understand the importance of digital inclusion, that everyone needs a certain level of digital access and skills. And also what was touched upon by the other speakers is that the digital divide is not solely around access to broadband internet, though that is definitely a crucial issue, particularly in tribal and rural areas. However, in order to fully address the digital divide, we need to address affordability, device access, technical support, and digital skills, digital literacy. For years, we've in the field talked about the homework gap, and now we're really seeing that it's the schoolwork gap, and that all students need this access and skills, and parents also need the skills to help them. What I do personally is I facilitate the Digital Inclusion Leaders Network, which is a cohort of local and state government practitioners. We meet regularly to share priorities and best practices on planning, funding, implementation, data analysis, program evaluation around their digital inclusion programs. Participants come from 18 state governments and almost 50 municipal county governments. And we're really trying to facilitate communication at all levels of government, particularly in a time like this. So again, I'm really excited to be here. I'm glad to learn from the other panelists. And yes, thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you all for those introductions. As you can see, we have a very distinguished and diverse panel. Again, this session is really going to be focused on looking at the COVID-19 impacts on our educational institutions, our elderly population, who unfortunately has been severely overlooked during this crisis, but as well as looking at some of the short-term solutions that different types of communities have pursued to address the ongoing educational needs of our students. I know that here at ASU, once our campus shut down and transitioned to completely online in the beginning of March, it had started just after our spring break had commenced. So a number of our Native American students, we have about 6% of our enrolled student population that has identified as American Indian, Alaska Native, or Native Hawaiian. And of course, being spring break, a lot of those, especially locally, a lot of those students had returned home to their respective reservations and communities. So when ASU had announced that we were transitioning to an online-only format, we worked with the American Indian Student Services population or department within ASU, as well as our University Technology Office, which thankfully was very proactive in trying to identify those students that had returned home, identify if they needed certain types of devices to continue their online education. And Kimball, you raised a great point about Chromebook, because we actually experienced this issue with trying to issue Chromebooks to our students, only to realize that our online applications that ASU was using as an institution, those applications weren't compatible with Chromebooks. So we had to then switch gears and either pool resources from our Windows or iOS operating system technologies to then get those devices out to our student population, but also contacting them to identify if they actually did have internet service within their communities. And also identify if they had internet access, what type of service provider was available and accessible to those Indian students back home. So definitely a very important topic. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to emphasize to everyone that, again, please submit your questions through the Q&A box. It'll make it easier for us to navigate and also address those questions later on in the session, or even during the session. If you'd like to share links with everyone attending the session, maybe helpful links, please use the chat box for that functionality. And again, we'll reserve about 20 minutes at the end of this session for Q&A from the audience. For now, I'd like to transition into some questions for our panelists. And Fernando, or Marian, I'm sorry, I'll start with you. You had mentioned working with the elderly population and ensuring that they have connectivity. One of the questions I have for you is, what have been your greatest challenges in continuing digital inclusion programs for our elderly population during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, we've had several challenges, as I said, trying to convert a program that was very high touch. We do a lot of hand holding with our programs with seniors, and trying to convert that to a virtual environment has not been an easy task. And our staff had to also learn how to use new technology and tools to create virtual training, the training videos that we've created. So we went through a long period of staff development, and now we're finding that another challenge we didn't really think about initially is that seniors we know they're fearful, but they're being even more reluctant to sign up for an online class. So now the question is, how do we encourage them enough that they will actually take advantage of virtual training?
Great, thank you, Miriam. Yeah, definitely an important point. I know that, especially in my own family, a lot of my family members who are elderly have had to transition to accessing a lot of online services, and have definitely seen that there is a lack of digital literacy in accessing different types of online platforms, or even having to be compliant with what their employers are requiring to access different types of sensitive information portals.
Right.
So it's definitely a very overlooked issue, and thank you for your work in that. Our next question, I'd like to direct to Kimball. You had mentioned some of the Chromebook issues. I was curious to see if you had any other issues similar to what I had raised with our student population, looking at how they were unable to access that information, but also, given the increasing likelihood that our K-12 schools will not resume in person this coming fall, or they may include a hybrid of in-person and online learning, what are the pueblos and tribes in New Mexico doing to improve connectivity on their lands, thereby ensuring their students are able to continue their education?
Well, thank you for that question. It's a lot of planning. It's a little bit of scrappiness, and it's a lot of problem solving. When we kind of broke it down into 3 phases, rapid response, getting that data, and like you said, finding out what works where, just to get them through in the spring. And then the midterm, I kind of see it as those public Wi-Fi locations. And when we start in the fall, we actually are buying them new Chromebooks. They're more of an expensive one, but they have a SIM bay, and it's unlocked so that when they can, go to the store and have a contract or a prepaid, then they can plop it in there, and they're going to buy whatever works best, and it's going to add some flexibility and take away that disconnect from the phone and the Chromebook. So I think that's been our scrappiest strategy, but we're hopeful that that's going to be an important tool. But what I'm really most excited about is, 2 things. First is that partnership I described to you about putting in all those tribal Wi-Fi locations. Our school has CARES money for our school population, but not as much as the state's public education department or what Indian Ed already had. So, with their funding and some of their resources, they were able to buy for all of our lands, and not just Santa Fe Indian school students. But then I came with the experience of working with tribes and on those lands and deploying networks. And so it was a good match. And then, of course, we match with the census and a great team called ITDRC, the Information Technology Disaster Resource Center. They usually respond to natural disasters, but here they're responding to COVID and come in and deploy public Wi-Fi access points for education, so that with that level of technology or installation capabilities, then we're able to reach all of these locations. It's an ambitious project because I mentioned if we're the most remote places in New Mexico, we've got to be some of the least connected places in the United States. It's an LTE solution, but it's going to be a nice midterm response. But still, we don't want kids in hot cars. That's not a good study space. They're not going to have transportation potentially, or their parents, just can't afford to take the time when they're working to transport their students, or they're caring for their siblings and then the elderly. So we're seeing those as the biggest challenge barriers to that deployment right now. That said, for about the last 5 years in New Mexico, our Pueblo tribes have been investing in fiber optic backbone infrastructure, largely through the E-rate program with the schools and libraries as the catalyst, and then through that multi-year process of educating leadership, tribal councils. The tribes have self-funded, to fiber optic infrastructure to connect beyond schools and libraries. And right before COVID, we were at the point where we were trying to plan for residential access. And then COVID hit, and we were just a little bit too slow. So while we paused momentarily for to kind of catch our breath of how we were going to go into remote learning, we've reignited the efforts, and I can think of between 6 to 8 networks that are going to come up where the tribes are providing their own internet access to the community for a fraction of the price of, not a fraction. At Santa Fe Indian School, to buy hotspots for our students for 1 year would be $350,000, a little more. For a mid-sized Pueblo to provide residential access to about 500 homes is $160,000. So because of that foundational work that we were able to do, we're ready to move, and the technical capabilities that we learned through that process, we're able now to transition into permanent tribal infrastructure. So we're thinking those are between 4 and 6 months out for the ones that have already started, but we keep getting those calls, and another tribe is ready and another tribe is ready. So if there can be a good outcome of COVID, it's really been to fast track tribally owned infrastructure, which is our solution because we weren't being served by the providers, which is what put us at this disadvantaged situation to begin with.
Brian, is it okay if I follow on to that?
Yes, please do, Amy.
Okay, sure. I would also like to second the real importance of partnerships, and partnerships not only for addressing the particular this particular situation, but also the fact that there have been long-standing partnerships. For example, in Albemarle County, Virginia, which is part rural, part urban, the school district and the county government has partnered for years to plan for the digital needs of their student population. So the district already had a one-to-one laptop program and has been working with Comcast to help sign up families for in their urban areas for internet access. But then they have areas that maybe they had to use hotspots, and then there are areas that are rural that still don't have access. So they've worked with the Albemarle Broadband Authority to obtain a grant from the state, a telecommunications grant to deploy broadband. Again, that's in the work, that was already in the works. But then the Broadband Authority has also worked to deploy public Wi-Fi in these remote areas that are not being well served right now. So again, this is a case, and I've seen this all across the country with the communities I work with, the areas that had programs, initiatives, partnerships prior to the pandemic have not surprisingly been in the best position to address some of the issues. I mean, it's all not perfect, but really, particularly those partnerships, those relationships, and across the different sectors working together, what the pandemic has done is to maybe ramp up or amplify the need for those efforts, but a lot of those sort of structures were put into place in some of the communities that have been best able to address the emergency situation.
Thanks. I mean, that's actually a really good transition to Fernando, since you mentioned Comcast. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about your partnership with NTIA, but also kind of overarching, looking at how the move to virtual and distance learning, being abrupt as it was, how it's led schools to quickly implement changes to ensure students could complete the school year. Can you share some of the ways that your organization has helped in in that transition to online learning?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you. I mean, just to add on to what she was saying earlier about it takes quite a bit. There's a lot of challenges to connect families, right? Especially folks, low-income communities across the country. So adding, issues of access, digital literacy, affordability, and then on top of that, you had a pandemic where educators and teachers now have a lot of pressure to be able to take that curriculum and be able to deliver it virtually. And then you add on parents at home having to work from home and then having to have kids work. It's a lot. And so I think what we've learned the most is that it's going to take all of us to really be able to address this issue. And we do play a part. I think we play a part in the connectivity and digital literacy space. And something that we were able to do right as this was taking off is that we are offering all of our customers, new customers, 2 months of free internet service to make sure that we're able to support them there. In addition to that, we announced that our Wi-Fi hotspots are open, and now they're open till the end of the year. We've also relaxed our bad debt rule to allow more folks to be able to participate in Internet Essentials. So now if there's a family that maybe owes Comcast some debt, but if they're eligible for Internet Essentials, that's forgiven so that they can enter into the program. In addition to that, for digital literacy, we have an online learning center where folks can get access to a lot of different content and curriculum, and we focused on learning from home. So these are tools for educators on how to take that curriculum and really drive it home. We have things there from Wide Open School, Sesame and Communities, PBS Kids Learning. We also have something from Shaw Academy, which is for anyone that wants to reskill or upskill during this time as they're rethinking their career, they have some opportunity there. But really to drive home partnerships that Emmy was saying, I think that's been the forefront in the success of our program, is that from the beginning, we've been a grassroots initiative where we work with local communities. We work with local nonprofits, libraries, to Marion's point, schools and school districts to really drive this message home, right? And to provide our materials in ways that are accessible to families. And actually something that we're doing now is we have an Xfinity Essentials partnership program that we've launched. And this gives schools, nonprofits, local governments an opportunity to sponsor service for any Internet Essentials customer. And this is really a way to bring our service to scale and in a manner that makes sense to the schools that need the service. It provides support for students to be able to finish, not only finish the school year, but now that we're entering, right, what looks to be another year of online learning, that those students and families have the support they need to kind of make that through.
Great, thanks, Fernando. Marion, I'd like to transition back to you. Given your work with the elderly, I know that you mentioned that your program content had changed a bit. Maybe you want to speak a little bit more to that, but also looking at how your program content has changed to address these short-term issues. But now that we're looking at an extended kind of time period regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe kind of talk a little bit about what your long-term solutions that your organization is looking at to continually address this issue.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Yes, our content has had to change because of COVID-19. We're spending more time developing courses that cover essential services, like how to order food and groceries online, because seniors are going to be sheltering at home a long time longer than the rest of us. So they need to be able to do these kinds of things, order prescription refills from home, connecting with family and friends. We're showing them how to use Zoom, and we'll be adding with funding from a CARE Act grant, hopefully, we'll be adding some training classes on online banking and bill pay. And I've been in discussion with one of the largest healthcare providers in the Nashville area, hoping that we'll be able to partner with them and do some training around telehealth services Seniors need to be able to do telehealth visits with their physicians, so we're excited about the possibility of being able to do that for seniors. And for the long term, I think that we have to figure out how to engage with those seniors who are reluctant to do online training. We've got to figure out ways to encourage them to participate. And one of the ways that I think that we're going to do that is we're going to provide them with a pre-configured tablet that we normally go through that process during the class, but we're going to pre-configure the tablet and personalize it for them before the class starts. So when they start the class, they will only need to click on the app for Zoom and they'll be connected to it. So it won't be a big deal for them. And we also want to provide a hotline for one-on-one tech support. We're currently taking calls, but an official hotline will make that a little bit smoother process for the seniors who are calling us for help. And for our pilot that we're doing in September with seniors, they will be purchasing Comcast Internet Essentials up front before they do the training, and we don't like doing it that way. Normally, they finish the training program, and then we help them to sign up for broadband access. So to take care of that problem, we're going to be buying loaner hotspots that we can loan out to seniors, and they can take at home, and they can take the class and then buy the internet essentials. So those are the kinds of things that we're working on right now.
Great, thanks, Marian. I actually have a follow-up question for you in terms of what you were saying about providing tablets and other types of devices for your senior population. Is there a specific type of device that maybe even specific types of applications and softwares that you've really been focused on to kind of limit the need to train those individuals on different types of operating systems?
Yes. We found that using tablets with seniors takes away some of the fear of using a computer. So we use 10-inch tablets. We think tablets smaller than 10-inch are really too small. Some of the seniors have trouble seeing them and manipulating the smaller tablets. So we use a 10-inch tablet, and we teach them basically how to use online services on their tablet. We do have one program where we use laptops and we teach Microsoft Office products, but that is a workforce development program with our partner, the National Council on Aging. And to also chime in on partnerships, our program would not work without all of the partners. We have partners all over the place in the Nashville community, with all the senior organizations. Comcast has been a huge partner. Google Fiber has been a huge partner. We just have multiple partners that we work with to make our programming work.
Great, thanks, Marian. Kimball, I want to transition back to you. One of the major topics of discussion that has been ongoing for nearly a year now since the FCC created the travel priority window, the 2.5 gigahertz band. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on, the need for residential access on travel lands is so severe, and as tribes rush to set up emergency wireless networks, what are the new technical and workforce capabilities needed, not only to identify how tribes can utilize the frequencies within the 2.5 gigahertz band, but also looking at what long-term solutions they'll have to identify once that transition takes place in terms of ensuring that those networks are sustained, maintained, and continue to provide service within tribal communities.
Sure, happy to answer that. And real quickly, I want to give a shout out to Fernando, we'll give him all the credit since he's representing Comcast today. Just noting that the work, the Internet Essentials and the no contract and, the digital literacy components they've wrapped around it. I think it's really a model, program. Unfortunately, Comcast is only in our urban centers in Albuquerque and Santa Fe in New Mexico, but I give props to also their outreach through my native friends. I saw a Comcast Internet Essentials ad targeted to urban native communities. So just by virtue that that made it into the social networking circles, the ones that they were aiming for, I think shows a real intentional effort to serve our communities. So good job, Fernando. To answer your question, the timeliness of that 2.5 gigahertz tribal priority window in some ways is a blessing for those ready to move. And in some ways, it didn't give the tribes the opportunity, because we're shut down during COVID, to organize and apply for the license. What it is there's the 2.5 gigahertz band of spectrum that is going up for auction soon. It used to be called the educational broadband spectrum. An order came out last year removing the educational component criteria for it. And it's being, it's desirable for the 5G rollout for many people. Normally, tribes, we have control over the tribal natural resources on our lands. We can say how our water resources are going to be used, and they're protected under our tribal sovereignty. The airspace above tribal lands is not so. We do not have access to spectrum in the same way. And so, the FCC and their processes has been slicing and dicing it and leasing it and subleasing it over us. And so it's been very hard for us to use it. And maybe in the past we weren't ready to use it, but we're ready now, and we have the technical capabilities to use it. So Chairman Pai in the order created the opportunity for tribes who have unlicensed EBS spectrum for 2.5, again, not all of them, to license it before August 3rd. So we've been, that's been a big policy effort for a lot of us. And it's a big logistical effort, because we're going through and contacting those tribes and doing the outreach and saying, make sure you do it, make sure you do it. So I'm hoping that we're going to have good participation here in the Pueblos. But what it's transitioning us to be, are our owner operators. That's very different from being a school, local, managing a local network. It's it's concepts of wide area network management. It's concepts of managing an ISP, the technical operations, to being able to strategize a business. And maybe it's not a business that's trying to make a lot of money, but you still need to know how to manage it and manage this this division of technology that's new on our tribal lands. So we're also, based on the previous work with the E-rate projects and bringing the fiber optics in, we essentially built a middle mile network using optical transport equipment. And as we build off of those to tag on these wireless networks, some of them will use the licensed 2.5. Some of them will just use unlicensed spectrum. CBRS is another band that's coming up next year. We're going to need to develop the technical capabilities to use that combination that makes sense based on the size of our networks, the density of the homes, if we have trees, if we have thick walls. So technically, we need to need to engineer these networks. We need to have people that will install things on their homes. I give a lot of credit to Santo Domingo Pueblo. It's one of our largest pueblos. They were quick to act with their CARES money. And because we brought the fiber optics to the library, and then the tribe self-invested and brought it to the government buildings, they are now out with 10 crews. They started with a smaller number. Hope they're up to it now. And by August 12th, they're going to have residential internet access in every college student, recent graduate, and high school student, and then eventually elementary student home. And they did that because of what we had learned through our previous experience. But they identified the need for those installers, and then they organized a local training crew, and they hired their own tribal members to bring income to those families, and became their own solution. So following their experience, we're setting up that model for the other tribes that I mentioned are going to be moving forward with these similar wireless network deployments. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kimball. Fernando, I want to transition back to you, and Emmy, please feel free to chime in on this, given that Kimball and Emmy both mentioned your program and how it's been so helpful. I was kind of wondering if, and Emmy, this kind of goes to you too, like I mentioned, but looking at how, a lot of different types of communities have sought to address the short-term solutions to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic and the transition to online education. Is there kind of some discussion now, given that we are about 6 months into the pandemic, looking at developing literature or case studies to actually report out how these communities have addressed these issues? I know that, of course, this Internet Governance Forum conference is really focused on talking about this situation, but in terms of looking at it from an academic standpoint, it would really be helpful to identify those different types of case studies, do some publications to show how different types of communities have addressed these issues on the short term, but also being forward thinking and looking at how to implement long-term solutions and dealing with these types of situations.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Brian. Not so sure how much I can share at this point, but I could say absolutely. To Kimball and Emmy's point, I think what's been at the forefront of what we do is that we listen. We listen to the communities that we're trying to work with, that we're trying to serve, and we're always trying to find solutions to address some barriers. And just quickly talking about some of the things that we've noticed and quick changes and pivots that we've made since this pandemic hit. We're, adopting the internet. There's so many more barriers aside from just, here's an application that you can go to, sign up, and get the service. And what we found out was that there's a little bit more, and things that we've done, for example, is we've increased the languages that our marketing materials and our application is available in. We've actually launched a new application that is mobilely optimized so that folks can complete that in 5 minutes. And then taking it further, as we're doing our sponsored service agreements or this Xfinity Essentials partnership program that I've talked about, is we're working with a lot of different groups to connect large groups of folks. And that's really where we are thinking about what can we do to really find out what the barriers were here, and if the solution is something that really made sense, which I think it is, and it just given the amount of attention we've gotten. For example, one of our bigger partnerships that we recently announced was in Chicago. So Chicago Connected is a partnership with the Chicago Public Schools, the city of Chicago, and lots of nonprofits in the area to connect 100,000 students and their families to internet, and to make sure that they have that service for the remainder of the school year and beyond. And something interesting there is that we're actually working with a coalition of nonprofits to get Internet Essentials information into the hands of these students and to help them sign up. And so innovative solutions like this do pique our interest. It's something that we've done in the past as we've worked with other groups to provide research around this area, and I'm sure it's something we'll continue to do.
Okay, I guess I'll add, there's a couple angles I could add from, one thing I just wanted to give a caveat, of course, in the example I mentioned, I mentioned Internet Essentials, who has been working with a lot of communities, but I also want to encourage communities to look at different, all sorts of providers. For example, North Carolina has been working with Sprint a lot with the mobile hotspot programs and their homework gap initiative, which again started before the pandemic. So I really want to encourage places to, you can go to the FCC 477 data, look at who your providers are. The FCC also maintains a list of the programs that have done some kind of modification for the COVID crisis. So, again, explore different options. I also want to touch upon tech support, which was mentioned a couple times. I've seen that as a really common response during COVID, but it's also something that in certain states, for example, California has funded a tech support hotline to help people, or a support hotline to help people navigate the process to get online for some years now, and we're seeing that happen more and more. So for example, Wisconsin just announced a similar support line. Rhode Island has one for teachers and students, and this whole idea of support that's not just about like specific technical issues, but the whole process of signing up, getting your Wi-Fi network to work, getting your computer. I mean, to so many of these people, it's just, if everybody, a lot of people have had experiences doing this type of stuff for their parents. I know I have. So now think about that all across the country. And so that kind of the role for either, whether it's governments, like some governments, for example, with California, they've contracted with some nonprofits. The city of Detroit has too. Sometimes it's the libraries, but that, again, looking at the different entities and looking at the needs and really what the barriers are at the ground level is really important, even when you're trying to set a national or statewide policy or initiative.
Great, thanks, Amy. Yeah, and you definitely raised some good points there. I know that, one of our concerns at ASU, and I'm going to kind of transition a little bit to the Q&A that we've received from participants. There's been a question regarding the thoughts on mental health, emotional health with distance learning. Maybe all of you can talk a little bit about how your organizations may be addressing that. Perhaps not directly, but connecting them to resources. I know that here at Arizona State University, I was actually finishing up my graduate degree this past spring. And although I was, or I am employed by ASU, I was still getting wellness checks from the university's American Indian Student Services because I was an enrolled student. Again, those are some of the little different efforts that American Indian Student Services and the other student services entities within the university were doing to ensure that our students were, having access to our mental health services, that it also transitioned to online since those different types of clinics were closed on our university campuses. But maybe all of you can just talk a little bit about how directly or indirectly you have been working with your respective communities and addressing that type of disconnect.
I can quickly. We've had to. In fact, we stood up a wellness department last year that we could receive Medicaid reimbursements, and we have a really dynamic director who's brought in all kinds of different therapies, pre-COVID. But when we went into COVID, it immediately went into a telehealth response for them, providing services remotely, not just for the students, but their families. And, when I hear Marianne talk, I see crossroads between her work and our work, with trying to engage the elderly for her. We're trying to do that because you have to engage them. You have to create these relationships online, potentially with new people, and that seems to be the magic, the magic in this. But it's been very challenging for students to keep their appointments. Either they're caring for family members, or they don't have privacy, in addition to not having the connectivity. But the social and emotional wellness piece is a huge part of our rollout. And from a technology perspective, we were trying to go deep into devices, so that it's not just that one device that we assume is going to be dedicated to, a K-12 student, but something that the family can use at the same time to address just the family life essential needs, from, paying bills to any kind of financial security. So that's my.
I can add to that to say, you know, we have heard it sort of ties into telehealth and sort of that move to telehealth. And we have heard from health service providers that have reached out that are working with low-income communities that want to make sure that their clients are doing well and that maybe lack internet access. And so we've just been working to help get the information to them, and in certain instances, work on outreach initiatives to help connect some of their clients.
Great, thank you. And as I mentioned before, we do have about 15 minutes left of this session, so I'll be pulling some questions that we've received from the question and answer box. So participants, please, if you have any additional questions for our panelists, please submit them through the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to pass those along. One of the other questions that we received was regarding training. So of course, a lot of training has had to occur with this transition to online resources. For teachers, teaching assistants, students, parents, even grandparents, different family members, tutors. The question is, how was training monitored with your respective programs? Was there an adequate feedback process or response from the trainings that were administered? How were the evaluation tools implemented? And kind of what are the metrics that you're looking at in terms of the responses and collecting that data?
Maybe from education, I can just say that I'm going to include all of those elements in our professional development rollout. You know, where we're starting from is back. You know, we're starting with evaluating products to evaluate and to implement, and then looking at best practices in our area. Santa Fe Public Schools has been a lot farther in being a future-ready school. About 5 years in a whole school-wide system, you know, from administration to support staff to teachers, everybody has a role in this. And so we're kind of following their lead. But what I thought was interesting about when they went to remote learning in the spring is they weren't grading student success on math and reading or any content area gains. They were measuring engagement as their indicator for success and staying active learners. So I'm going to put student engagement up there as the best practice that I've got my eye
on. Interestingly enough, again, this goes back before COVID, but certain programs such as Tech Goes Home, Power My Learning, some of these one-to-one type programs which engage parents. Not only our distribution of laptops to go to home, but engage parents in training, you know, for example, training on how to use the parent portals and such. Also professional development, that type of teachers, you know, so the wraparound programs, you know, devices, access, and training for the whole family and teachers. What they observed with oftentimes with parents, that there would be increased engagement with the school, not just online, but when they were able to go to the school, you know, the parents would come to their, you know, teacher meetings more often, would be more engaged with the PTA. So that actual online connection kind of helped trigger more interaction, even physical interaction with the schools. And so hopefully that I would agree with Kimball that whole engagement piece should be part of some kind of evaluation process, because it's not just about test scores, but is how it builds the connections and community with the schools.
Yeah, and then just to quickly add, absolutely. I think our training, again, is really done at the localized level. We work with partners to identify what their clients need. So it could be just a wide array of digital literacy training, anything from basic tech skills to soft coding. To Marion's point, right now, there's a big push to provide digital literacy so that folks are able to get the services they need online, right? Now that a lot of things that are closed in person, there's that level of need. So we really focus on funding hyperlocal solutions across our footprint. And then in addition to that, we have our online learning center, which has quite a bit of hours of digital literacy content, and that's monitored by, how many visitors we have to the hours are engaging. To Kimball's point, the engagement that people are having with that content.
I also wanted to add that there are digital skills frameworks out there. One issue that's happened with trying to evaluate, do program evaluation, is that the digital skills needed to operate in the society or for education is ever evolving. It changes. So now things like, well, certainly online safety and security and knowing how to protect yourself, that changes quite often. So, people have definitely done surveys and tried different ways and are trying different ways to measure, to do program evaluation and do that. But a lot of, I want to highlight some of the work that, for example, University of Washington has done in terms of cataloging digital skills and comparing digital skills. There's some frameworks, even international frameworks, but just looking, I can type it in, but just looking at all the array of different digital skills that are needed may be able to help people devise their own evaluation frameworks as well.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to the next question that we received from our question and answer box, which I think is a very important question. How can we make sure websites are user-friendly? I think that's actually two-pronged in terms of being user-friendly in the sense that people can access and understand how to navigate them. But also, I know that I've been in conversations with tribal communities that experience very throttled communications access. And when they go to an HTML heavy website, they either cannot access the information located on that website, or they have to wait and download for excessive amounts of time to actually access that web page. And thinking about having to navigate through the various links when trying to access the HTML heavy website and how that impacts communities that have lower access rates or lower bandwidth capabilities. So I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. I'm not quite sure if you can directly address it, but I think it is definitely an important question.
I just think it's ironic when two things, when some of this mapping with the ARC, the interactive mapping on connectivity, when there takes so much bandwidth and you're trying to find out how unconnected you are and they're slow and choking out and you can't see. Or two, when you publish where the public Wi-Fi locations are on a website for people who can't use the internet to find location.
I can also just quickly add to that. I would say in terms of our website, it's something we rely on partner feedback to let us know how their clients perceive it and how they're using it. Just going back, last month we launched our new application, and that a lot of the changes there were made through partner feedback. Like Kimball mentioned, lower income communities and folks really over-index in mobile phone usage, and so we knew that that was a way to make access easier for folks. And so our new application is just mobilely optimized. If you go to it, it's very simple to use. It helps walk you through the process quickly, and it's something that you just you use your phone every day. So it kind of helps you. It's something that you're familiar with. But I would say all of the changes and that we've made been through feedback and through listening to what our clients and customers need.
Thank you. Another question we have is regarding educational access. Is there a preference for locally owned or managed solutions, such as mesh networks, or large-scale solutions such as SpaceX satellite-based broadband, which I know has been really being discussed lately due to SpaceX initiatives, but maybe you want to give your thoughts on that.
I'm still a little bit personally, satellite always getting better, but I just haven't seen it be that solution for us personally. And then, now when we're in Connected America or Keep America Connected times, just the the latency always, but then also with extending the lifting the data caps, but just for a little bit, and then the eventual throttling. We weren't able to utilize any satellite service for a long-term solution. So we'll see how SpaceX evolves with that. But with the mesh networks, I mean, probably other people on this panel can speak to it better, but I just think it's really interesting that we're not in, and many, our schools are so heavily reliant on E-rate and participate in E-rate, but that was created in 1996 when the school was on the property. It's not now when it's extended to the homes and our students need to do their homework, communicate with their peers and their teachers, over miles, over geography. And there's some really interesting, in our work, we're using the tribal libraries as that first stop then to connect with checked out devices, or the tribal governments then to connect to the homes. But I just lost what I was going to say. Oh, but there's some town really big, like maybe Cleveland or something, where they're working with their local ISP in a mesh network so that the school using the school network is actually being transmitted over the ISP wirelessly into the homes. So now we're seeing these models come out where school networks don't stop at the property lines, and students have those school resources from their homes, under that security umbrella that the district provides. So I think that's really innovative, and I'm excited to see how that's going to grow.
Thank you. I know that we have, I think, about 4 minutes left. So I'll end with this question. And this could go to everyone. Would you provide examples of online resources recommended to students to assist them with their studies? And Marion, perhaps you can talk about some of the programs that you guys may be utilizing for your elderly population. I know that I have a niece that's just entering 4th grade, and her elementary school is definitely pushing different applications versus what my father, who's a teacher at our tribal school, is using different online applications to teach their students. So maybe give some recommendations on the programs that you guys are using that could be helpful for our attendees.
Okay, I'll start first, Brian. We have partnerships with a couple of different other programs that I think other seniors can benefit from. One of those is with an organization called Cyber Seniors, and we have adapted some of their program locally, but they also, since COVID-19, have a large online training presence now. They do weekly Zoom training classes, which they record so they can be viewed later. They also have a phone hotline that seniors can call to get one-on-one help. So we probably will be increasing our partnership with them very soon to take advantage of some additional resources there. We also partner with another nonprofit that's called Generations Online. And again, they also have a lot of resources for seniors, online programs that seniors can take advantage of. They especially have a good course on learning to use Zoom. So those are two nonprofits, national nonprofits that we work with, and I think seniors can benefit from using, because they don't have to go through another organization. You can go directly to their website. And I will say that when our team was first started, we did work with families with school-age children. So we participated in getting internet in a large way into, we were working with the public housing community into the housing, and the housing management, I think, as Fernando was talking about, they purchased internet essentials for the families for a couple of years. So they had a couple of years free, but they were the organization that paid for the service for the families in the community. And I can recommend one program from the Connect Home program that I've been a partner of too for children is ABC Mouse. I think it's a wonderful program for younger school kids. I actually have a great niece who was using it, and I mean, I was just amazed at how much she knew before she started school. So yeah, we've had experiences with other age groups too, and those partnerships where you can get resources are really important.
I'd also like to add on.
Real quick, any final thoughts? I know we're rounding up on time now.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Oops. Okay. Oh, are we?
No, yeah, continue. Just
okay. To acknowledge our HUD colleagues, Connect Home, and that program. Also, the Office of Educational Technology in the Department of Education has a blog series, as well as their website has a lot of resources. Maybe not directly for the students, but they have for districts and departments of education that are looking at these issues and communities. I definitely recommend some of these federal resources.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone. I want to thank our panelists for a very great discussion, and also our attendees for some great questions. I want to transition it back over to the IGF staff for next steps.